Hello, hello! This is Puddle. If you've seen Neverly Alone, I'm sure you noticed the shadow. In the final episode, Nicole's last vlog, well, spoilers for Neverly Alone if you haven't seen it. Okay, so in the last video, she mentions how she originally saw the shadow while she was having night terrors, along with a lot of other frightening things. This is based on my own experiences with night terrors. If you've seen my work before, you might already know that I have a thing called visual snow, or visual static. Basically, it looks like I have noise and bloom over my vision at all times, but especially in the dark. The darker it is, the more static is visible. And since this started when I was a young child, I noticed that my brain would pick out patterns in the static. I'd see monsters and movement, and it was so scary. Sometimes I'd wake up and I was convinced there were ants everywhere around me, because it looked like ants were everywhere around me. And this lasted a long time. Eventually, life stresses and visual snow combined to create the most inconvenient symptom possible: hypnagogic hallucinations. I've heard it also pronounced hypnagogic. You get them when you're falling asleep. So very similar to the case in Neverly Alone, when my parents had split up and I was at first getting tossed around between family members, it was confusing. I felt isolated and, frankly, like I could never really be wanted by anyone. What followed set me up for nightmarish relationships and a handful of anxiety disorders. And like I said, I'm working on it. Therapy helps. But before I got to this point, the night terrors were picking up. I'd see people standing in my room, facing the walls. They terrified me. Sometimes they'd be closer, sometimes against the corners. Sometimes it looked like they were merged with the walls, but they always faced away from me, and I was so scared of that. I could see their hands and their shoulders twitch, and I remembered thinking, well, what's going to happen when they turn around? After seeing a small town's worth of people in my room every night, if it was a person, there was never a face. And I think the reason for that, I read once a long time ago, was that when we dream of people, the faces we see are actually faces that we've pulled from reality. And sometimes certain parts of multiple faces can combine, but for the most part, we don't invent faces in dreams. And night terrors are essentially half-awake dreams, the inability to move and wake yourself. I've been reading my own dreams since I was 10. Wait, that was weird. That's one of my song lyrics, like an old song. I've been reading my own dreams since I was 10, as an outlet for my need to find some meaning. Weird. So I've been reading my own dreams since I was 10, and if there's one thing I learned through the art of dream interpretation, it's that once you've learned what your subconscious is telling you, usually repetitive dreams stop. I remember seeing people pop up all the time, night after night, facing my walls for years, and I read, "We don't create faces in dreams," and I stopped fearing the idea of them turning around. And suddenly, I stopped getting those visitors altogether. The most I'd get afterwards was this silhouette of a figure. It was taller than the people who stood in my room. It would hug the corners, where the shadows were the darkest. Sometimes I'd swear it was taller, having to crane its neck to keep its head from hitting the ceiling, and it was a freaky visual, made up of my static. Sometimes it felt like I could see eyes or eye-like orbs, darkness within darkness, if that makes sense. It was like trying to focus on a blurry memory, or, well, a dream. The more I tried to understand what I could see, the less that I could focus on, the less sense it all made, until it faded completely. And it was strange, but honestly never threatening. I never felt scared of it because I knew if I tried staring at it, it would fade or go further into the shadows, and I felt safe somehow. I entered a relationship with someone who was not good for me. My night terrors picked back up, and they changed. I was being watched now. I'd see shadows outside of my windows, who were people-shaped, or shadows of feet under the door. And weirdly enough, the things that were never in my room were way more threatening than the silhouette that I just told you about. I was like, what? Where'd the other guy go? Come back. Because it meant that I wouldn't at least be alone in those vulnerable moments. I was half asleep. There's a headspace you slip into during dreams. A sort of, yeah, okay, acceptance for everything, including the nonsensical. Well, especially the nonsensical. But during the case of the night terrors, you've got one foot in that space and one foot in reality, where you're trying to pull yourself together, but you know you don't have control. You can't move, so you just accept things as they come, no matter how weird or terrifying, and your heart beats out of your chest until you do eventually wake up. And when I didn't have randos outside of the doors and windows, I had demon babies crawling on me. Ooh, demon babies. One would sit on my chest and it would make this horrible wheezing sound. It never touched my face, but I felt like I was being crushed to death. I couldn't breathe. I remember looking at this thing on me and going, shit, 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 again? And my eyes would dart around the room, desperately hoping that if I could focus on something like my stars or my jacket on the chair, or the thing on my chest would just disappear. But unfortunately, it didn't work like that. I needed something to really pull my attention. I couldn't intentionally reshift it. These struggles lasted for literal years, seeing ghosts at my bedside, feeling bugs crawling on me, being unable to breathe, feeling the pressure on my chest and my stomach, and I'd write them down. I'd try to understand what they could mean. I wished I could just keep one thing to protect me from the rest. And as soon as I made that realization that that's what I wanted a protector, I got lucky. That figure started to show up again, and I got what I wanted. Ghostly limbs would lurk, demon babies would sit atop my chest, my eyes would dart around the room, and settle on a friend. They would dart back to the stress, and it would be gone. So I started writing Neverly Alone. I started putting together a character going through something similar, but it was so vulnerable. I needed to deliver what she was going through another character's mouth. And I loved the styles of thriller web series like Lonely Girl 15 and Marble Hornets, and I wanted to make a character who went too far in pursuit of satisfying their own curiosity of solving that mystery. They take on a role similar to a lot of horror and ARG enthusiasts on YouTube like Nexpo or Nightmind. And I don't have night terrors too often anymore. I started wearing a sleeping mask when I went to bed, or putting in earbuds to keep my brain from spooking me. Sometimes I'd hear whispers directly in my ear, or old relatives yelling from afar. It was weird. At one point, a friend heard me screaming from my room. I swear I'd heard a man's voice whisper in my ear as I was falling asleep. "He's already here." I felt chills the whole night and a weird, uncalled-for fear of it happening again. And like I said, I'd wear a sleep mask and earbuds, but they'd usually come off by morning because I move. And I don't get spooked as much anymore, mostly because I'm sharing a bed with someone now. But if I do see someone or something lurking, a demon baby or otherwise, I know that I can reach out. After all, I have a friend in the shadows. Here are some patrons. They're really cool people, and if you want to support me, that would be amazing.